So now we're going to have the opportunity for members of the audience to ask questions of our panelists, and I will be passing this microphone around. Okay, back here. Excuse me.
Hi, my name is Darrell Brown, and I moved to San Francisco from Charleston, South Carolina. And I am gearing things up this semester with my advisors and everybody at San Francisco State University to complete my undergraduate studies and move on to the next level by the grace of God. Right now, I am so filled with all kinds of emotions. One that keeps lingering, of course, is anger. I'm angry because of the injustices that I have incurred in my own personal life, and as you all talk about, I'm greatly angered, and more so about the injustices that I've seen occur in the lives of innocent people throughout the earth. One question for you is, how do you feel about reevaluation counseling and what's called internalized racism? My only other question is for each one of you is if I can get a business card so that I can do a follow-up. I especially like to talk with you because another thing that I'm getting ready to get back into is Sunday school teaching. And that is a key area where we need all of this to take place in the classroom. It's a prime opportunity when Spirit is moving and working in people to help us all move the rocks out of the stream so the water can flow mellifluously from soul to heart to mind. So.
Say your name again, son.
Sorry, Darrell Brown.
So, Darrell, let me just say that as a black woman, I offer you love and respect. And I know what stereotype is. Anybody know what their stereotype threat is? It's from Stanford, a professor named Steele. And what they did is they studied classroom situations where they took the gifted children of color and they told them, this test is going to be really hard, you're not going to be able to pass it. And then they weren't able to. So this is in terms of internalized oppression, because racism hurts everyone. But what's happened is because there are no more shackles on my legs or on my arms, it's in the mind. And so what we have to do is we have to start to unravel what we've been told is the truth about ourselves. So you have to start back with the premise that you're a divine being. If you were not divine, you would not be here. Now, that there's something that's going on that we're all in this together trying to figure out, can this be heaven here on earth? So we're divided because some people are saying, well, heaven is after we die, and so this is all temporary, so I can act any way I want. I can live in greed. I can take from the poor. I can close my heart when I see someone else suffering because they're going to go to hell and I'm going to go to heaven. So the internalized oppression piece is you have to start to listen to what you're saying to yourself and then pick up the energy that is in the room. Because sometimes as a facilitator trainer, if there's enough racism in the room, I can't even spell the. And then I know, oh, the big R is in the room. And so it's very important to stop to think about what you're thinking about. Now, we have a whole collective unconsciousness that has built these patterns of cultural identity that says some people are better than others, but it's a lie. So we have to figure out how to erase those lies from our own mind and our own heart. So I want to start by saying, as a woman, I love you as a man, that you're my son, that I'll do everything I can to protect you, and I will tell the truth about this mean machine that's eating brown and black people, our babies. And I'm going to give you a couple books to read. The New Jim Crow, and then a book called The Warmth of Many Suns. The New Jim Crow talks about the laws after slavery that put slaves at even greater risk than being a slave. Because while you were a slave, you were somebody's property, and they said, don't be bothering my slave. But when emancipation came and the blacks were free, anybody could be mad and lynch you and beat you and take something from you. So black people, by the droves, migrated out of the South, leaving everything in the middle of the night for the fear of their lives. And that, to me, talks about the pain of the inner cities that we're facing now. Because if you don't heal the pain of your past, I don't care what color you are, you're bringing it into your future. So unlearning racism is looking at internalized oppression. How have we been so oppressed that we cannot see that there's something wrong with sending fear and hatred to young black boys and girls, people of color? So you might say, well, I'm not doing that. What do I have to do with, this is the argument that I hear with a lot of people. Why are you so angry at me? I didn't do anything. Well, we're standing in the foot of our ancestors, and some of us don't even know that our ancestors were slave owners. So that whole internalized oppression piece, it works both hands. You oppress yourself from thinking that you can do anything, and you oppress yourself from liberating yourself and other people because you are in denial about what your bloodline is. So that's where forgiveness comes in. Absolutely forgiveness. So it's very important for you to begin to forgive yourself for harming yourself, body, mind, and spirit in this life or any other life, and then move from compassion. Thank you.
So I know that it was asked if each of the panelists could share, but in the interest of time, since we're moving on to the next part of our program very soon, would it be okay if you follow up with the panelists a little bit afterward, and we have just maybe time for one more question from the audience? Any questions? Wow, okay. Oh, over here.
So I participated in a Kingian nonviolence training last weekend, and I'm listening to this room and I see no familiar faces, and I'm wondering, why are we all so disparate? Why are we working separately? Why aren't we working more together, and how do we work more together?
Well, I think that's a really good question. I feel like in each of our organizations, we have to do more to think about how we can work more creatively with each other. So ask the question, like, who should be coming to the table? Who's doing this work already? Who do I need to work with to build these bridges throughout the whole community? I know with you or I, with this Talking Back to Hate, we're working on a local symposium, which will be called Higher Ground, and it's trying to look at how we can work together across the community, across different sectors of the community, government, interfaith workers, peace workers, school, teachers, school administrators, law enforcement, to address these issues that we're facing about discrimination across the board. So we want to pull together all of these different leaders and have conversation and start there. But I think that each of us in our organizations can be more forthcoming in terms of thinking about that and asking those questions, not just thinking about our own organization, but how this really what our purpose is, what our mission is, and how to achieve that, how to share resources and work together. So I don't necessarily have any answers, but I think, by asking those questions, it's a good start.
Great question. I find that there's a strength that we do get from community that we don't get by living as a lone ranger. So I agree with the concerns there. And when we are curious as to why maybe there isn't as much interaction, my comment would be a simple slogan: let it begin with me. let me reach out and realize that every single person here is my brother and my sister, and let it start with me where there's that bridge that we can have with one another. And this is why we have this event, so that there can be cross-pollination, that there can be connecting with one another. We each have different perspectives, and we can learn from each other. So instead of complaining, I will light a candle and let it begin with me by how I treat others, how I regard others. One of the biggest areas of growth in my personal life, it was commented earlier today, was collaborative point of view, that every single person has something that I can learn from and I can grow from. And that's showing honor to every person. It doesn't matter what creed, what color, what socioeconomic background they have. I can learn from everyone. And having that attitude will help us to address this problem. Thanks.
I would just like to take a moment to tell you about Carry the Vision, the nonprofit that we started several years ago, which has had 8 convenings over the years of conferences that brings together people from all different sectors of our guiding institutions, from education, nonprofits, religious and spiritual communities, government, business. And our work in particular has been to bring people together who are already working for peace and nonviolence in the community so that we can get to know each other. And it's been a very inspired project. We have usually about 500 people who will convene, and wonderful energy goes forth from it. One thing I will say is that one of the important things that we can do when we have these gatherings is to do our best to invite beyond the usual suspects. So, you know, we bring together, you know, people that we know and people that we appreciate and people that we align with politically for the most part. But the real work that we have to do is, as you were saying, you know, who's not at the table. And so one year at the Carry the Vision conference, we invited, this was several years ago, the local police chief to speak at a nonviolence conference. And he was very moved by that experience. It was a call, if you can imagine. It was a call up for him. And to think about, you know, what they were doing and how they could better serve. And later, a government official told me, he said, you have no idea how much that meant and how much it can transform someone to call on their humanity in that deep way and to invite them to step into it. So I see that as the work that we have before us as well. Thank you.
I think that last question really resonated with a lot of people. I've had people passing me notes about different resources and their organizations with which they are working. And you have a kind of a follow-up question?
If I have time.
We don't have a lot of time, so.
Okay, well, I'll just be brief, but I think this is particularly to Pablo, but also to the Reverend and the Yogacharya, and that is, I notice in your topic, the approach is psychological and spiritual, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this, and in context of the young man question about the embedded racism and so on and so forth. So bear with me, and you'll see where I'm going with this, and I would very much like your answer. So one of the things that, you know, those of us who practice Eastern religions are also familiar with Western religions. We know that in Eastern philosophy, the heart is the seat of intellect. That's where the compassion comes, as the Yogacharya will tell you. Whereas in Western culture, it's all, not all, but it's predominantly either Freudian, Jungian, Erich Fromm, Jesus, and that's whatever, that's good, because all of the religions teach us the same thing. Be still and know. The heart is a seat of intellect, love one another. So there's no conflict in the religious part. So I was curious about, from going from aggression to compassion, what are the commonalities that you see in your work aligning the psychological and the spiritual? If you can speak to that, and if the Reverend can also comment about the shutting down of indigenous religions by slavery, indentureship, and those kinds of embedded conflicts that we have not really resolved.
To only say it in 30 seconds or less. What a great opportunity for a hook here. Come to my workshop and we'll discuss it. However, a spiritual awakening isn't just these images that we have from the Western point of view. A spiritual awakening is learning to be at peace with ourselves, to be less judgmental towards others and ourselves, to be able to appreciate life, and to not allow the pressures of life to stop us from enjoying the little heavenly moments that can be in 15 seconds, mini vacations. So we have to change our whole concept of what a spiritual awakening can be as we learn not to be so obsessive and controlling, that instead we can release others to be who they are. So there's a lot that we can discuss, but our time's up. So I'd be happy to talk with anyone after this time. Thanks.
I just took a trip to Ghana. I was there for 2 months, and I was really surprised at how much Christianity has taken over in terms of the predominant religion. I got to be with a mystic named Brother Ishmael Tete, and he's written a little book called The Mission of Jesus Revealed. And I think it's a tipping point for world peace. And he said that Jesus died because he had the audacity to say that he was the Son of God, that being human was divine. So when we move out of religion that has said that Jesus died because we were all sinners, that Jesus was the master teacher of oneness. Isn't that beautiful? So in terms of spiritual, if we get out of religion and get into spirituality and get into the concept of oneness and begin to understand that everything that we're feeling, the world is feeling, and if we can really do our work on our own selves, then it impacts ourselves, our relationships, and so forth and so on. So the tipping point is to really stop telling ourselves that we're sinners. We missed the mark. Yeah, we're not all perfect. But this concept of sinners, when you think sinner, 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 I'm sinner, what do? You sin. Oh, God, forgive me. And then you sin. So what about I'm divine, I'm divine, I'm divine? How does divinity want to express itself through me right now? That's my answer.
Thank you to all of our panelists. Maybe next year in the program we should put a little more time in for questions and answers, because I know that this generated a lot of good discussion so far, and luckily we do have the opportunity, because each of our panelists will be leading a workshop, so you can kind of continue to discuss with them. It'll be a challenge to figure out which one you want to go to, though, probably. But that will be the next part of our program for today. We're going to be going to our breakout discussions. In your program, it does list out where each workshop will be held. You'll notice that most of them are in the Mud Building. The Mud Building is also where we have our refreshments, so it would be a good place to go after this part of our program ends. It is down across the courtyard and a little bit to the right. It's where the Mud Building is. We're all going there together, though, so I think we'll be able to find it. So I would like to thank our panelists, and you can all have a seat. So before we go into our breakout groups, we are going to have some instructions on what we're going to be doing in our breakouts. So I would like to invite up Reverend Paul Chafee. He's the publisher and editor of the Interfaith Observer, and the founding executive director of the Interfaith Center at the Presidio. He sat on the URI, United Religions Initiative's original board of directors for 6 years, and was a trustee of the North American Interfaith Network for 10, and served as a Parliament ambassador for the Parliament of World Religions for 3 years. So he's going to give us some instructions for our breakout session. So please join me in welcoming him to the stage.